Good morning, Matt.
Rick, what's going on, man?
Did you see the Oscars?
Yes, I did.
So Chris Rock looked really confused when Will Smith walked onto stage, then hit him.
All right. Yeah, see what you got. Why did the hamburger go to the gym? To get some buns.
Oh, my goodness.
At least I kept mine in the fitness realm.
Welcome, everyone. There you go. Dad jokes of the day. I think Matt lost. He laughed first, but like we'll let you tell next time. Maybe I'll laugh. But yeah, I laugh because you're laughing, so that doesn't count. You laugh first.
At least mine was in the fitness.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But mine was really relevant.
It was relevant.
Yeah,
that is the hottest topic of.
It's still
of the
going.
Week. Still rolling.
All the memes and hey, next year Mike Tyson's hosting. Like all these just ridiculous things. So. All right, let's talk about this. So, not like anybody cares about what we think, but what do you think about that overall?
Well, to be honest, Will Smith was kind of like a idol role model for me when I was a kid.
Was he?
Because I knew watched every Fresh Prince and everything.
You got one little fight and your mom got scared?
So I feel like I'm Team Will now. Can't let,
You need to talk to your boy then. 'Cause it looked to me like he was kind of having a little bit of a breakdown.
Oh, he's definitely having a breakdown.
Okay. All right. Then we agree on that, right?
Something is not right.
All this defending honor stuff, I'm like, maybe. But there's a way to go about that. That ain't
so
it.
You're saying if Andrea, your wife, looked at you the way Jada did, and you wouldn't have just went up on stage and slapped somebody silly?
No, I would ask her, why are you looking at me like that? That's so weird. Don't do that.
What's wrong with you? It's funny.
Right. That's a great joke, babe. I know it's at your expense. That's what makes it funny.
So I saw a thing, and this is, internet never forgets, right? And it was literally Will Smith telling
I sent you
alopecia.
that.
Was that you?
Or you sent it to me.
I don't know.
Yeah,
it was.
He was making fun of someone who was bald in the past that had alopecia. I'm like, okay, bro. Like,
yeah, you actually did send it to me.
Yeah,
God, I can't remember anything.
Well, listen, at the end of the day, that's why you don't do things like that, because there's too much information out there on everyone. Like, just be a nice person. Give people a little bit of grace. Like, people aren't perfect. A comedian is hired to do a job, and sometimes they're going to tell jokes. They're going to cross that line a little bit and tell jokes that hurt feelings or what have you. If you've seen any of the clips from like Ricky Gervais doing it in the past, completely savage. I mean, there was one the other day that I was watching with him, and he was like, this show has gotten so long. Last year it was so long that Leonardo DiCaprio's girlfriend was too old for him by the time it was over. I was like, there's a lot of savage jokes out there, right? And so the fact that it was really, even if he didn't know, if he knew about her medical condition, it wasn't really about that. Like, that's his job. Will Smith knows him. He's a smaller statured individual. To walk on stage and think nothing's going to happen if you slap another person in the face, it's just weird. You're just completely detached from reality. And
it was TV history. It was awesome.
To sit there with your lips quivering and screaming in the crowd, something's up, man. Go get some meds, talk to somebody, get a friend. I don't know, something. But yeah, it was not a good look for the Fresh Prince. I'll give you that.
By the way, all this is on the internet too. So
I didn't say anything.
Well, I'm just saying.
Yeah. I mean, world wants to know. What's Matt thinking? Our
team that produces these may. Before takes.
Don't even think about it. Our production team's here's the uncut version of all the podcasts. That would probably sink us. But anyway. All right. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about.
Let's talk about what we're going to talk about.
This was Matt's idea. I love the subject matter. It's sort of around entrepreneurship, right? And Matt, explain more how you explained it to me.
We have a lot of different folks come into the franchise space, and a lot of folks have never owned a business. That maybe they've worked for corporate, they've never done this, so they don't really know what to expect. We try to coach along this way, so I figured it'd be a good conversation to talk about. I mean, you are, 30 years running entrepreneur, really longer than that if you go back to your childhood, and we won't go into whatever you were dealing back then.
Jolly Ranchers and toothpicks. But yeah, there would be just a great kind of conversation around like what you started what your expectations were and what they've grown to, and now what we expect. Yeah. I love it. I think it's a great topic.
Yeah. So, let's just roll back 30 years opening a gym. Like, what were your expectations when you're opening a gym? What the heck? Can you remember that for me? No, I'm just kidding.
Barely.
You do remember everything, which is scary.
I do have a weird memory. But I will say that, knowing kind of where you wanted to go with it, I had a minute to be like, let me think about that. I don't think at the time, I was so young. I was 22 years old. I don't think I had any preconceived notions. Now, we've talked about this before, and now I didn't realize it then, but I know now. I had the distinct advantage of living in a household with a father who was a consummate entrepreneur, right? I saw, like, I was old enough to remember him leaving his company, opening his own company, hiring people, leading a team, the struggles that came with that, right? I remember like tightening our belts a little bit, just little things around that. Like, my mom getting rid of her nicer car and getting a older used car for a while. And I mean, it didn't last long, but I just remember some conversations and stuff around that vaguely. And also just sort of watching the risk that he was taking in doing that, and the way he handled it. So even when I opened at 22, I didn't realize that I was advantaged having seen that before, but now I do. And I think that probably gave me a leg up on what the expectations were. But I really would say I didn't have any, but I loved what I did, and I'm very competitive. And so I did not want to not succeed. And so, again, I didn't know what it took to run a business, but I was willing to do whatever it took. Now, my story, and a lot of people listening know my story. About 6 years into the business, we had a massive hiccup. It almost sank our business. Now, in hindsight, it became the impetus for what became licensing and now full franchising. So it was a blessing in disguise. But what I realized in that time was that I wasn't doing the things that an entrepreneur needed to do. And I think the better way to say that would be, I landed in the perfect place at the perfect time with the perfect business model. All the stars aligned. And I thought I was working hard and being very smart, but I was really just lucky. And that's okay. I'll take luck over smart sometimes, right? Sure. Or maybe all the time, but maybe both. But in hindsight, it was really, didn't have the right lenses on my business. And so it probably took me 6 years after I opened. I was willing to work hard and all that to figure it out. And I think the biggest thing was I wasn't leading my team correctly. I wasn't holding them accountable to the things that needed to be done. I didn't have any like systems in place, right? And I had myself convinced that I had this business that was kind of running itself and I could just be completely absent. Right. And not absent. I was in there too, but I mean absent as the owner. I might have been in the business physically also as a trainer, but as far as how I handled my other business functions and led my team, I was pretty much absent for that part of it. And that's a big mistake.
Right. It was just in your mind. It was like, we're good. It's just running. I don't have to check in on nothing.
Yeah, good to go. Got it figured out. And I had never done anything. We had been successful in spite of that crooked lens, if you will, or broken lens. And so why would I change it? I thought I had it all figured out, only to find out that I did not. And I think the key is, what was the response? That's the key. So I should have, in hindsight, been able to head a lot of the problems that came about off at the pass had I been paying attention to my business in the way that I should have.
Right.
Now, I guess the second phase of that would be like when you wake up, whatever that might be, how do you respond? What are you going to do about it? And so for me, I'm very competitive. So it was like, oh shit, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. I have not been running a good business. I was just in the right place at the right time. Clear, very honest self-reflection. Okay, well, you're either going to go and do something else or pull up your bootstraps and figure out how to be a better leader and business owner. Right. And I think that's also key, is not necessarily like not paying attention is one thing, but then typically the fruits of that are going to be not good. And if they are not good, then you're going to need to buck up and pay attention to your business.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you've lived you've been, full on in your business owner roles. You've done semi-absentee, you could say, and almost, full absentee, right? You've lived all those things. So through that, right, you're full owner, and then a lot of folks, maybe they find a franchise and their goal is to get it up and running and you move out, right? It's similar to what you're doing. Mm-hmm. But the mistake is once you got it going, that you didn't have to do maybe as much or needed to lean in as much, right?
Yeah, and if I'm honest, the way that I was functioning in the business, Matt, was like I was just working there.
Right.
So the business, because again, I'm sitting in a seat in the business, right? So I'm operating as a high-level coach in my own business.
Yeah.
That's not the role. So I really was absent in a lot of ways in my business, in the sense that I wasn't paying attention to other trainers' metrics. Right. I wasn't looking at necessarily profitability through others' labor. It was just like, all right, well, these guys cover most of my overhead. I'm in here coaching. I'm putting all that in my pocket then in my mind, right? Just a just a weird lens. I never really was doing the functions that a business owner should do. And so it was a skewed lens on what the expectation should have been. Mm-hmm. And in hindsight, it was like a terrible way to run a business. I was lucky that I didn't completely go out of business with my lack of engagement. So it's not necessarily about even physically being there. It's about knowing what to pay attention to and how to adjust when those things that you're paying attention to aren't going the way that they should be.
Right. Yeah. So basically, you started out, you worked your way through it. You had a little ups and downs, but you got back, inserted yourself back into that position. Well, since then, you've had many businesses, right? So you've learned from that. What are like? I know you've started gyms. I mean, what was your expectations, and how did you handle hiring, like looking for that person, and how did you hold them accountable? What did you do there?
Yeah, and I mean, again, 30 years, I've made a lot of mistakes. And so one of the mistakes I was making early on is I would hire people, and if they weren't performing, I wanted them to, I almost wanted it more for them than they wanted it for themselves. And so I was guilty of leaving people around for too long that weren't performing. And I think it was because I was inexperienced. So I felt like maybe I hadn't given them all the training and everything that I needed. But in hindsight, that wasn't it. Like now I know, right? Like it's taken a while, but I would say probably even as far back as maybe 10 years ago, it's like, I pretty much can tell you, I've got in our businesses, I have KPIs set up that have to be met. I'm typically hiring someone in not for their potential per se in most of the positions. It's like I'm hiring them for what they've already done. So if you look at our director position, which is the operator for our clubs, right? You can go and hire somebody who's young, who has no experience, but that's a critical role. I would rather our franchisees, and what I would look for in a corporate gym, which we've just hired here, is someone who's done that before, right? So I'm going to pay you and compensate you for what you've already accomplished in your life for these important positions. Listen, bringing someone as a part-time coach, if they're a wait staff or whatever and the right athlete, they got the right, lens on life, they've got great energy, I can teach them the workout stuff. That's something that you've mastered making simple enough, right? So we can teach people how to coach in that way. But to teach people how to operate a business, it's a different animal. And I mean, I learned it and luckily, didn't go out of business while learning it. But I think now I'm only hiring people that have already done it for key positions. And that typically means their compensation is higher. And if I'm going to pay more and I'm going to hire someone in, and I want to know that you've already done it before. So if I'm say if I'm an Alloy franchisee and I'm looking for my operator, everyone's like, oh, it's a key position. Well, it's key like in any business, right? If you're operating any business and you're hiring a manager and you want to be a semi-absentee, and I use that word strongly, no one's fully absentee, a semi-absentee owner, you better hire someone who has some experience that's done it before. And in our role, it's like, okay, let's just take one of the functions of the operator. It's pre-sales, right? Well, you're going to need somebody who's organized, who's run a good pre-sale before. You're going to want to validate that they've actually done it, right? You're going to want to look at, like, are they showing up on time for the appointments that you have for them, like for interviews and things like that? Because all those little tells for a position that's that important are going to tell you how their personal life is organized, which is going to manifest itself in your business. Right. This person needs to be organized. They need to care. They need to be competitive so that they'll fight for leads and closing leads. It's some gamesmanship around it. It just needs to be important. And boy, I can tell you now that I've done it a million times, I can spot the stinkers a mile away. And I don't, like you and I, Matt will always, it's always like maybe, right? It's the old, what did we talk about this one time? The Chinese farmer, right? Who gets the horse and it's like, oh, great, maybe. And then son falls off, breaks his leg. Oh, it's terrible. Maybe, right? So it's the same kind of idea here where, hey, this person's going to be great. Well, maybe. Like the proof's in the pudding, right? I like what I see so far, but like, it's nothing. What does it Suzanne always say? Nothing's nothing till it's something. So it's the same kind of idea with us where here's all the attributes. I can see things that are trending well, but got to proofs in the outcomes.
Yeah. Period. So, I mean, I think what I heard what you're saying, like, even we don't like using the word absentee owner at all. I mean, you're still obviously need to be in your business, but you don't have to be in the day-to-day operations, but you have to be holding your person, whatever it is, accountable to proper metrics. So she had a good point about like, don't, fire quickly and don't let them stick. I can forget what that's that saying, but like letting somebody just stick around. Like, oh yeah. I mean, it's like,
quick to fire, slow to hire. And listen, when you say things like that, I think some people that are more in their fields, they feel like, oh, that's so crude. That's a terrible way to look at things. You should be helping people. We are. Don't get me wrong. Like we have a huge heart. I just told you the biggest mistake we've made historically has been holding on to people too long. Because again, it's like, the whole statement, like ignorance before malevolence is where we start, meaning like, have we given them every tool and every opportunity and every bit of training?
Right.
At the end of the day, we have a very comprehensive, like now that we're in franchising, all that stuff is bolted together. I can unequivocally say yes to, have we given them the training, the attention, and everything? I know that. I'm confident in that. Yes. Then if you still can't meet these metrics, or if you're missing appointments, or if you're absent or whatever, you got to go. I mean, at the end of the day. And I think what you're getting at, Matt's the core of what a business owner needs to understand is that term absentee. The reason it's not a relevant term and it shouldn't be used is because it doesn't, when you say semi-absentee, that doesn't mean you're working, servicing revenue in your business. What it does mean is that you are going to, let's just say in our case, log onto your dashboard, look at we have very clear-cut dashboard software built out where you can go in and look and see the pipelines of leads and sales. You can see the actionable steps to move from one pipeline to the other.
Right.
And you can easily see whether or not those functions are being executed, period.
Right.
At the lowest level as an owner, that's what you should be doing, right?
Yeah, it was just simple, just keeping somebody accountable to your actual outcomes that you want.
What I don't understand about any business owner, and I mean, this is entrepreneurship that we're talking about in general, is why you would invest money in something and then not pay attention to it at that level. It doesn't, some people hear this and they're like, well, I don't want to be a micromanager. I'm like, it's not micromanaging. Like, think about that level of engagement. If you think you've got the right person in the seat, as an example, for some of these functions, looking at where they might be struggling gives you the opportunity to lean in and help them. Right?
Sure.
First and foremost. So I look at that level of engagement, not micromanaging, but level of engagement as more caring about that person than I do micromanaging them and putting my thumb on them, because nobody wants that. I don't want to manage that way. Business owners shouldn't want to manage that way. You should hire good people and not have to do that. But you need to be paying attention to the outcomes. And if the outcomes aren't good, that's your opportunity to help that person. So you're helping them, they're helping you, right?
Right.
That's what it's all about.
We've talked about this before, is honestly, as employees, you want that, right? You want somebody that is
that's
working,
what I mean. Yes.
Right? Because it's like, what's important to you is important to me. And it just goes throughout the process.
Yeah. And so let's say that's the scenario. If you have the right person in that seat, to your point, they will absolutely appreciate the fact that you are paying attention to the fruits of their labor. And if they're not good, you're going to help them, and you're on the same team, and you're both trying to help your community. Like in our case, you're trying to help your communities be healthy, right? Mm-hmm. So it's same team, same team. If, as an example, you did lean in and you found a little bit of shucking and jiving, or a little bit of like obtuse behavior, that might be something where you're like, meh, that's a red flag, right? You want engagement from that person at the same level that you have. I will tell you, and this is all entrepreneurship. So yes, certainly we're speaking about Alloy because that's what we're familiar with. But I can tell you from our standpoint, like when we're coaching franchisees, we give a lot, right? We coach the operator, and then we have like check-in calls with the owners. Yeah. We're doing a little bit of both. And a lot of times with the operators, we can sort of identify these things, and then we'll go to the owner and kind of point them towards good and red flags or positive things that are happening in the business, right? Just because we have experience with it. But at some point as the owner, you've got to find out what those key metrics are in your business and pay attention to them and coach to them. That's the level of engagement that you're expected, even if you never step foot in your facility. So when we opened the facility with Anthony, right, 5 or 6 years ago, we had our KPIs in place. Now, I didn't have to micromanage him. I've literally only been in that facility like 3 times in my entire life. I didn't even have a key. Yeah. But it didn't mean that I couldn't look at the dashboards from a high level and say, hey, man, like, what's going on here? Or, hey, this is great. Sales are really good. Or, hey, retention's off by 1% this month. What's going on? And every time I did that, because Anthony and I had a great partnership and he's a great guy, there was an answer that made sense. And then he appreciated the fact that I was even paying attention to what he was doing over there. Like, it mattered to me, right? He mattered to me. The business mattered to me. And what the business did for that community mattered to me. That's the level of engagement that you have to have if you're going to be an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing I've always noticed throughout the years with you, I mean, again, you've had multiple businesses, and we're talking, a lot of small business for the most part, right? Franchise, small small business, very few employees. A lot of folks come from maybe a corporate background where there's departments for everything. You send it. In a small business, it's a lot of times it's all hands on deck. And I think I've noticed about you is like, you're not afraid, like if something needs to be done or whatever happens, you're always, as the owner, you're always there to like, oh, I got it. I'll handle it. Right. No matter what function it may fall into. I know a lot of people that's really new to them, right? Because again, from there, they've never had to do that. Like, oh, we'll just call Susan over here in marketing and we'll take care of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, dude, that's a perfect description. You're 100% right. So I think this is maybe a heads up for anybody that has worked in a big corporation. Some people, quite honestly, are just better suited for that environment, right? They like having bandwidth. Maybe they're really good at one vertical and that's it. Maybe they don't have the stress tolerance for entrepreneurship, whatever that might be. But if you're going to move in that direction, and I think a lot of people deep down is sort of like, hey, could I do that? Could I do that? Like I always want to take my shot, right? Mm-hmm. And we talk about like in the 5 Regrets of the Dying book, like the number one was I wished I'd lived life. I had the courage to live life on my terms as opposed to how other people thought I should. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people, you hear that and they just have this gnawing, like, could I do it? Could I do it? Right. And then if you're coming out of big corporate, that's what you mentioned is the biggest mental shift that you're going to have to make is I still do it. Like if the corporate gym is currently attached to the corporate office. So if I walk to the corporate gym to use the restroom because it's, in the locker room and there's a small torn paper towel on the floor, I pick it up. I don't say, oh, can I go and tell a coach who's going to tell the manager who then calls the cleaning crew who's going to pick it up. It's going to happen like Friday. It's mid-morning. There's going to be customers coming in. I know the coaches haven't seen it. They haven't had a chance to go in there yet. Why not pick it up, right? That's just the level of engagement that you have to have as an entrepreneur. And I think that never changes no matter how big your company gets.
Yeah, well, and to go back to our previous point, those kind of things transfer right to your employees. Right?
It's like they don't see it.
Like if I see you picking up trash, it's like, oh, yeah, I better make sure I'm doing the same thing.
Right, yeah. It's
a level of appreciation and dedication for what you do. So 100% on that.
Yeah, but you're right. So if you're coming out of a corporate job and you're considering entrepreneurship, you don't have a marketing department. You're not going to have compliance. You're not going to have this or that. And, I've heard people say this that are getting into entrepreneurship. Well, that's their job. I'm like, there's no such thing as their job, our job. Now, again, we're not micromanaging and we're not stepping over people to do their functions. But your term was all hands on deck. I love that term because it's like, hey, certainly at critical times in the business, there are times, certainly a year down the road into your business, maybe 2 years, 3 years, whatever that is, you can be more hands-off, but certainly early on, there's going to be a time when it's literally all hands on deck. And whether it's your attention, money, time, actual labor, whatever that is, depending on the structure of that business, you're going to need to be there. Yeah. And to assume that you can set it and forget it because you used to work in a giant corporation that had 18 departments that handled everything and you only did your one function, you are really going to be in for a rude awakening if you think that's how small business works.
Yeah. It's not that you can't get to that place and like,
100%.
But it's like, I don't know of any businesses out there where you just buy it and then it just goes.
Maybe that's what. I mean,
maybe we need to find that one now.
No, I mean it's not. There are none. Right. I think it's a pie in the sky. Listen, at the end of the day, right now, if you're a young person and you're on Instagram, entrepreneurship, it looks so cool. And it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, if you can pull it off and you make it work, and certainly a franchise gives you a much better percentage opportunity of succeeding, it's amazing. Nothing's like it in the world, but it's not easy.
Right.
Nothing worth having that's amazing is going to be easy.
You are literally what most of our new franchisees and any business are working towards. Right? You have multiple businesses, and you are high level, keep accountable, or have people on your team to help you do that. It's not that you're in there every second, but you had to work to get to that point.
There was 30 years, right? Yeah. I mean, it didn't take me that long, but it took me a while. It took me 6 years to figure out that I even needed to be engaged as the owner. And then it took me a while to figure out how to do that. Now, again, if you're just an independent, entrepreneur, it's probably going to take you a minute to figure it out. I mean, obviously, if you're going into a franchise, if you're coming into an alloy, it makes it a lot easier because we're going to point you towards the right things to pay attention to. You still have to shift gears mentally and lean into your business. You can't say, oh, well, I'm going to do this. And, I've hired these people. They're going to do that. It's like, well, they might, but you at least need to be measuring it. And if it's not getting done, you need to have the ability to coach them towards it.
Well, that's why I buy a franchise, cuts corners. we've already learned from all the mistakes we've ever made in 30 years. That's why you do it. Like, not so you don't have to go out on your own and figure it out yourself. It just, actually doesn't make sense anymore.
100%.
There's so much information out there. Why would you? But no, that's a great story. Anything to add?
No, I think that's it. I think, it's not always sunshine and roses, as we know. It is amazing, but it's also really hard. And sometimes it's like, backbreakingly hard emotionally. But you know what? That's what makes it amazing. You can't have peaks without valleys, period.
Right.
So to think that you're going to stick a toe in the water and end up with something amazing on the other end of it, what in life is absolutely amazing that takes no effort? I can't think of anything. What about you?
Was there's nothing worth getting if you're not worth the work to put in the work?
This sounds like a country song.
I'm like terrible at these things.
You are. You and Suzanne are neck and neck. There's nothing worth saying and
nothing
doing
worth
if you ain't doing it. Why do I feel like I'm doing a podcast with Joe Biden right
now? Canceled.
Sorry. Well, listen, dude, I'm not saying I lean any way politically, but
God, we're out of here.
Hold on. We all have to admit he does struggle to formulate sentences. So we can all admit that.
And we're moving on. Thanks for everybody for listening.
Matt's trying to keep us out of trouble, you guys. I hope that helped. Just giving you the right lenses for getting into entrepreneurship. No such thing as semi-absentee ownership. Lean in. Learn what metrics in your business are important. At least coach to those. You don't have to be in there all the time, but you at least have to pay attention to it. And your employees will appreciate you. And for heaven's sake, so will your business.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.